Frankie was a Mormon mother who started a YouTube channel known as 8 Passengers, and at its peak, this YouTube channel had almost 2 million subscribers. And in 2023, this same woman was arrested and charged with multiple counts of child abuse against her own children. This video will be reacting to Devil in the Family, which is the new Hulu series about this case. It also features for the first time stories from Sherry Frankie and Chad Frankie and Kevin Frankie, which is Kevin is the dad and the other are the two of the oldest kids. So we're going to talk about them sharing their stories for the first time. The other absolutely mind-blowing part of this show, which is what just I think has blown everyone out of the water, is that Kevin Frankie, the dad, turned over 1,000 hours of unreleased footage that the family documented over the years that they created their YouTube channel. And so the other crazy part of this show is that we get an inside view as to what the day-to-day life was like for these children and just what a monster Ruby really was. I'll also say I think that this show should have been called Devils in the Family, because I think Kevin, after watching the show, after learning the story, after especially some of the things I learned about him that even weren't included in the show, I think he qualifies as a devil too, for not protecting his children, for abandoning his children, and for not 100% saying that Ruby is evil. At the end of the show, he says he still loves her. So we're just going to say Devils in the Family on this one. Before I jump into any more of the story, just know that this video will contain spoilers, so just know that that's coming before you continue. In this video, I'll also be sharing some of the passages from Sherry Frankie's book. Like I said, Sherry is the oldest daughter. Sherry also doesn't ever call Kevin or Ruby mom and dad, which is a clear distinction from Chad. So Chad will say mom, Chad will say dad. Sherry, though, chooses very consciously to not refer to her parents as mom and dad. She is still a member of the Mormon Church. She's a student at BYU. She regularly posts pictures of her doing very Mormon-y things. This is her in front of the temple that she posted this last week. And so, from what I can tell, maybe Chad is the only one that's no longer active in the church, but it seems that Sherry and her dad are both still believing members. And so one of the things I'm going to get into is analyzing how much Mormon doctrine did 100% play a role in the children's abuse. Keep in mind, we now have two national headline-making stories. We have Lori Vallow, we have Ruby Frankie, and in both of those stories, which I'm going to get into in more depth, both of those stories, the women said their children were possessed and that the women's abuse was due to the possessions within the children because the children were demonically possessed. Demonic possession is part of Mormon doctrine. And so do not let anyone tell you that what these women did is not part of Mormon doctrine, because they were being informed by their belief. And so we're going to get into that. I'm going to share my analysis and perspective as an ex-Mormon, and I'm going to be reacting to some of the clips of the show and some passages from the book. This is also the first time they've all been kind of on camera together. They've given different interviews. You know, Sherry wrote her book. They've talked to the press here and there, but this is the first time in kind of a long form format we're hearing their stories. There was another movie that came out about Ruby Frankie that was produced by Lifetime. When the movie came out, Sherry Frankie said, none of us were contacted about the movie. None of the proceeds are going to the kids. This movie is trash and only hurts my siblings more. Please do not support this movie. And so that's another interesting part of the Hulu series, is that it's made with permission and with collaboration with the family, and not, you know, just a podcast or show that was kind of made without them sharing their perspectives or their side of the story. I will say that watching this show was not for the faint of heart. I cried every episode. There's 3 episodes kind of throughout. It's just really horrible to watch a mother treat her children that way and to see the children not protected. And I will also say, after I watched the show, as I was doing my research, there's a subreddit called 8 Passengers Snark. There's a lot of fundamentalist snark pages on Reddit. There's TV show snark pages, you know, there's influencer snark pages. But in this page, I was going through to research. There's actually some really interesting resources that I'll link to below. They have a pretty good timeline of events, how everything shook out. So I'll link it below. But as I was doing my research for the video, what I'm leading up to is that I was just kind of going through, clicking up on all the top posts, and I happened upon the very not safe for work photos of what Ruby Franke did to her youngest son. And they don't show it in the Hulu show. When they show what happened to him in the Hulu series, they blur the injuries, which is, I think, for the best. You know, it's very graphic. I actually, after I swiped through the photos, I went and looked in the comments, and almost every single comment is someone saying, I wish I didn't look at those. And I felt the same after viewing those. And that is 100% how I felt, because almost when you watch the Hulu series, you kind of feel like he was definitely abused. But upon seeing the photos, I think she should have been tried for attempted murder. I think that had a few more weeks passed, it would have been murder. And the fact that she just got aggravated child abuse and not attempted murder is wild to me after seeing those photos, because what she did to those children is so horrific. She would have killed them, especially the older boy from the pictures I saw. I didn't see pictures specifically of injuries on the daughter. And I won't link to those pictures below. I'm sure with enough gumption you can find them. But I will say that those photos gave me even more vitriol to Ruby, because past just not feeding them, past just not treating them well, or even entrapping them and kind of imprisoning them, she 100% was going to kill them. And so I just wanted to add that as a perspective that doesn't get shown in the show, which is that I believe it should have been tried as attempted murder. And I believe that if she had kidnapped anyone else off the street and done the same things to them, it would have been attempted murder. The fact that she got child abuse and not something more severe because it was, I guess, her own children makes no sense to me. And I think she got off easy. Here's the clip I wanted to lead with. This is at the end of episode 1. And like I said, they show a lot of these types of instances where she is acting this way towards her children.
Hold on. Out. What was that look for?
Sorry, I just get nervous.
Stop getting scared. Look, just be yourself.
That is myself.
Well, then change it.
I've learned that there was...
So, as you can see, the camera's kind of, she's probably filming for some video. One of the kids is pulling a face that she doesn't like, and you almost, in a moment, you're like, oh, she's saying, just be yourself. And then just that scene, the reason I wanted to lead with that is so much of the Hulu show, it's mind-boggling to watch, because the number of times they show clips like this, you get the sense that there were probably hundreds of more clips that at a certain point they were just like, we can't include all of this. It seems like this was just the drumbeat of their life. This constant angry mom in the background, screaming, yelling, sometimes hitting. I also think this show is crazy because it is also an expose on Kevin. Here is Kevin saying that there was a lot of things going on in the background that he didn't know about. And what the editors do here is very smart and also very illustrative and damning to Kevin.
A whole lot of horror that was going on in the shadows and behind the scenes.
When you are... We're gonna cut that out. You get down and you be quiet. This isn't your turn. Now sit.
And cut.
Yeah, we're cutting that out.
The number of times, too, that she is just so evil to her kids, and then she turns around with a smile, it's chilling. It really is horrific to watch, because the way that she's manipulative in those moments is crazy. But this was to show you a little bit about Kevin. He does not redeem himself at all by any stretch of the imagination in this show. As you can see in this clip, he is, Ruby is trying to talk to the camera, and one of the kids does something she doesn't like. She grabs them by the face, wrenches them away, not your turn, raises her voice, and then we see Kevin's fingers come in front of the camera. We hear his voice, cut. Does he sound bothered? Does he sound like, ooh, Ruby, I've never seen you do that before to our little girl? No, he sounds like he's taking a walk in the park. This is, the most average day of his life. And I think the fact that he wasn't charged with child abuse is merely because he didn't do the worst of it. But I do believe that this show shows that he was quite complicit in the average, everyday, abuse in America. And I think it's interesting to talk to people in Europe or other parts of the world, because the strictness of American parents is in some places not legal. In some places it's not legal to spank your children. In America, it is legal in all 50 states to spank your children. And I always say, if you hit a child on the butt, it's called spanking. If you hit an adult on the butt, it's called assault. And I do not spank. I'll also probably bring in a little bit of my own perspective as a mother of 2 young children. I've never spanked my children. There's no need. You don't need to. And I think the fact that people resort to that is, in America, it's not abuse, but the law is not always moral either. So just because something is not illegal doesn't mean it's not immoral. It obviously made me quite emotional to watch this, and I think it probably makes most people emotional. But anyways, the fact they edited it like this, I think, is also very damning, because obviously they're asking him, did you know it was this bad? And he's saying, oh, it was all happening in the shadows. And they show a really awful moment where Kevin, average day in the Frankie house. So I think that this show also showed how brainwashed Kevin is, and that he was also complicit in the abuse. It's why I'm glad we get perspectives in the show from Sherry, from Chad, we get perspectives from Kevin, because they all kind of exit this wild story of what happened to them, what happened to their family, with different takeaways, whether it's membership in the church, whether it's, humor, or, Sherry Frankie is trying to pass a bill in Utah to do more to protect child YouTubers / influencers and make sure that there's a clearer way for them to be compensated for their acting. Everybody just seems to have a different way of leaving this experience they had, especially seeing the kids who, these are kind of the first wave of child influencers become adults who can speak for themselves, who can represent themselves, who can have their own lawyers. This is the first time we're getting to see what they actually have to say about it. And I'm sure as time goes on, we're going to see more and more children become adults coming forward to say, it was not always happy sunshine and roses growing up in this content house. In the show, Sherry says that Ruby would call them employees. Here is the intro to the show and where we pick up as the audience.
And I do believe that Satan is a person.
Yes.
Hi, I was just wondering if you could do some favors. Taking me to the nearest police station.
Let's see.
So that is Ruby Frankie's youngest son. And I do love that in the show, they blur all the faces of the 4 youngest children. They don't say their names to protect their identities more fully. The quality of a Ring camera, if that's what it is very low. But you can tell even in this low quality camera that this boy is completely emaciated. He is skin and bones and he's limping. Even from the intro, it's like very hard to not just immediately start tearing up because it's just horrible. It's horrific, what she did. And I think what Sherry says there, that's Sherry at the beginning speaking, she's talking about the devil, which is obviously the premise of the show too, is devil in the family. In her book, Sherry talks about the devil too. She says, "Why might a little girl harbor such tangible fears of demonic possession? I'm sure the deeply religious paradigm I was steeped in played a role. We firmly believed in Satan's power and the ability of his legion of fallen spirits to possess individuals. We believe that evil can inhabit physical forms, sometimes fleetingly, sometimes for extended periods. Having been raised to believe the very air I breathed was thick with unseen forces battling for dominion over my soul, it was a small step for my young mind to imagine that battle raging in my own bedroom." I, as a young Mormon girl, was also taught this story of demonic possession, which is funny that now it's coming up so much in these stories because I've never really talked very much about this aspect, this teaching of Mormon doctrine, but I'm doing a deep dive for this video. The belief is essentially that there was a war in heaven and Jesus presented one plan, Heavenly Father's other child, Satan, presented another plan. Jesus and Satan are brothers. Heavenly Father had his spirit babies, and Jesus and Satan were 2 of those. The rest of us were also Heavenly Father's spirit babies. When Satan did not accept Jesus Christ's plan for mankind, Heavenly Father cast him out, along with about 1/3 of the host of heaven. Those spirit babies, who are also Heavenly Father's spirit babies, they are sent to earth to tempt and to try those of us lucky enough and righteous enough to come to earth. And so that is what Sherry's talking about. She's talking about that 1/3 of the host of heaven who's just swarming the earth, trying to get all of us to sin, trying to possess our bodies. Possession is a very specific part of this story. One of the best parts of coming to earth was that our souls got to have bodies. And one of the biggest parts of the punishment for that 1/3 of the host of heaven is that they don't get a body. So I grew up learning that those spirits really want to possess you. They really want to get a body. In my family, we would read the story in Matthew about there's a man who's possessed by demons. Jesus cast them out into a herd of swine. We would read that story. In the Doctrine and Covenants, which is one of Mormon scriptures, Joseph Smith outlined how to tell a devil, an evil spirit, from an angel. And the secret is that you should ask to shake their hand. So, as much as Mormonism now is focusing more on Jesus, the devil as a very real, scary entity that is looking to tempt and to try and to beguile is very much part of Mormon doctrine. And the reason Lori Vallow killed her kids is because she said they were possessed by demons. And the reason Ruby Franke abused her children and I believe tried to murder them is because she said they were possessed by demons. Don't ever let anyone tell you that Mormon doctrine was not responsible for the abuse and murder of these children, because the women say it themselves. And demonic possession, as Sherry writes in her book, is Mormon doctrine. And I learned it growing up. So did Sherry, so did Chad, so did Kevin Frankie. So this doctrine is causing this almost religious psychosis and fear that these demons are, they're just trying to get into our bodies so thoroughly, and we have to be careful and be watchful. And I think that criticism, not just the devil criticism, but the Mormon doctrine criticism, which is that Ruby gets the title of devil in the show, which is very deserved. But there seems to be in Kevin and even in Sherry, who's the most level-headed of all of them, to further deconstruct how this teaching, how this doctrine, how this religious culture is what was informing the choices that led their family down this road. To give you a little bit more background on the three that are interviewed for the show, first we have Kevin. He is, from what I understand, still active in the church. All this time, he was a professor at Brigham Young University. So he was an engineering professor. It was interesting trying to research this professorship because if you go on Google, you can still see that his bio, his professor bio, is listed on Google search results. But you cannot click through. It's a broken link. He also has a Rate My Professor profile. But from what Reddit says, around the time this was all coming out, he was either let go, he quit, it's not clear, but from what I can tell, he no longer works at Brigham Young University. We also have Sherry in the show. Sherry is the oldest daughter. She wrote the book. She's working on the bill to protect or give more resources to child influencers and YouTubers in Utah. The main component of the bill is that if parents are showing their children in family vlogs, that they have to deposit 15% of their child's income into a trust. The legislation also establishes a pathway for adults to remove social media content they starred in as kids, which I think is a great, I think that should be a nationwide, if I had my way, there would be no children on any public social media at all, which is such a far cry from what is the current reality, so that's probably not going to happen. But in my opinion, if you have a private account, okay, post pictures of your kids, because only the people you've let into your circle are going to be able to see them. It's not a public account. I think as soon as you make an account public, that the platforms should just not allow you to show children. There's lots of things platforms already won't let you show, which is good. I think they could very easily, if they had the wherewithal, they could very easily add that you just can't feature children. That seems to me like a very logical way to go about this as a society, is that children need to be protected and that children should not be featured on public social media accounts where anyone can access them. I did learn from her book that Sherry is quite active in the church. If I had to guess, I would say that she has not received her temple endowment yet, which I've talked about quite a bit on on my channel. She probably is just doing baptisms for the dead. Typically, you don't do your endowment until you either serve a mission or you are married in the temple. So since she hasn't served a mission or been married yet, she is likely not endowed. She's not wearing garments. She's still pre-endowment Mormon. I did think her title was interesting. It's The House of My Mother. The intro references a scripture from the Song of Solomon. I kept running over this title in my head and I was like, why does that sound kind of familiar? And I remembered that on the front of every single Mormon temple, it says, "Holiness to the Lord, the house of the Lord." So I don't know, she has that Bible verse in there, but to me it seemed to be a bit of a play on the house of the Lord, the house of the devil. I don't know if that's really what she was going for, but in my opinion, the house of feels very Mormon and reminiscent of the temple to me. And finally, we have Chad. Chad is the oldest son. He's the second child. He's about 20 years old, and he seems to have taken his trauma and turned it into humor, from my opinion. So he has a ton of reels. In the trailer for the Ruby Frankie Hulu series, they show this absolutely crazy clip where she's creating content around scheduling and calendaring, and seems like she's trying to make a thumbnail, so she's like crazy smiling close to the camera and she's talking and it doesn't seem too weird, and then all of a sudden she goes from her happy smiley face to screaming off camera, "Be quiet!" She's yelling at her kids. And keep in mind that as the person who's on the other side of the camera, you can't hear any yelling or bumps or thuds outside from the kids. It's totally quiet. You get the sense that whatever noise the children made, it was potentially just quiet little steps in the hallway because you can't hear the noise that she's yelling about on the screen. And then she immediately turns back and she's got that crazy smile. You can see how when she's cutting out all of the yelling and all of the abuse, she's just this smiling, happy mother who's balancing all her 6 kids. And she's, this boss lady that she gets everything done. She's a great mom and she makes homemade bread. And this dystopian energy of screaming at the kids and then smiling for the camera is very chilling to watch. Recently on a live stream, Chad has social media accounts where he posts regularly, and I guess on a live stream he started making fun of his mom in that marker scene. He also has this video where he says he's gonna get a tattoo of his mom for the summer, and then no tattoo. So he does a lot of these humorous, it's very dark humor, that's for sure, where he's kind of relitigating his past. In one of the most viral ones, I guess Mr. Beast did a competition to see who could last longest sleeping on a beanbag. And a core part of the story, which we'll get to the clips, is that Ruby took away bed privileges from Chad because he was not being obedient, and he had to sleep on a beanbag for 7 months. And in his TikTok video, he shows this scene of Mr. Beast and this beanbag competition, and he says, I would have lasted about 7 months, and it has like 2 million likes or something. So seeing Sherry and Chad go these two opposite directions is quite interesting because you can see that they're really dealing with the abuse they suffered in different ways, which is completely valid, and also why I think, criticizing Sherry for still being Mormon is something I'll probably never do personally, because, when someone's dealt with that much trauma, if they find that their religion helps them, if they find that humor, being funny on the internet and twerking in videos is helping them, far be it from me to judge how people deal with a hyper abusive mom who almost murdered their other siblings. I still think I always will advocate for criticizing Mormonism, the church, the doctrine, but I try not to criticize the people who are living at the hands of this doctrine, purely because I think it's more accurate to see them as victims of a dominant religion that is damaging. The other two people in the show who are very heavily highlighted but not interviewed is Ruby Frankie, obviously, and a woman named Jodi Hildebrandt. To jump a little bit more into Ruby, Ruby was raised in a big Mormon family. As she was arrested for abusing her children, her parents were actually serving a Mormon mission, and it seems that her parents didn't even fly back to see what was going on or to help or even to take their grandkids. This is also, to me, totally not surprising that grandparents would choose to stay on a mission rather than rescuing their grandchildren from being severely abused. Ruby Frankie's parents also wrote a letter telling the judge that Ruby should get as much mercy as possible in her sentencing. And so Sherry also talks quite a bit about how Ruby's mom, whose name is Jennifer and Chad are Ruby's parents, she talks about how they, especially Jennifer, Ruby's mom, so she basically says Ruby learned it somewhere, and she's saying Ruby learned this behavior from her mom. And so Ruby was raised very Mormon. Ruby also went to BYU, Brigham Young University. That's the Mormon college. That's also the college I went to. Ruby also, from what I can tell, has not been excommunicated for abusing her kids. It also seems that Lori Vallow was not excommunicated, which is crazy. If you caught my video last week, you know that the Mormon Church regularly chooses to excommunicate apostates or people. I would have been excommunicated if I was still a member and trying to talk about everything I've shared on my channel. John DeLynn is someone who also has been outspoken against the Mormon Church and critical. He was also excommunicated. So it's wild to me to see who they choose to excommunicate and who they choose not to excommunicate. Apparently, child abuse, felony child abuse is not an excommunicatable offense. The implications of her not being excommunicated is that And keep in mind, Sherry is still a member. She's still a believing member. If you don't get excommunicated, it means that according to Mormon doctrine, Ruby Frankie is still sealed to her children in the afterlife. So Mormon doctrine says that when you're married in the temple, you are linked to those people. Usually it's taught as a happy-go-lucky thing. You're linked in your marriage and to your children in the afterlife. So according to Mormon doctrine, since Ruby Frankie was not excommunicated, she is still sealed to Kevin, and they are still sealed to her children. So the children that she almost murdered are irrevocably linked to her in the afterlife in a way that is nigh unto impossible to break unless she gets excommunicated. Living with that in your mind as someone who believes in this doctrine, I'm sure is incredibly challenging, because the Lord God is not going to break the link between you and your abusive mother. Unless the church chooses to cut that thread themselves. Here's another scene of Ruby from episode 1.
Okay, move it. If you cut one more thing in my house, I am going to cut your cat's head right off.
But I knew that's how it was modeled for her. Love is obedience. But
as you can hear Kevin say there, love is obedience. And I think what love is also ultra Mormon doctrine of what they're saying love is. And I have some quotes from Mormon leaders to share with you guys about how love is actually punishment. And that is also Mormon doctrine. I think, to reiterate, it's crazy to me the level to which Mormon doctrine does play a role in so much of this story, and that the level to which it plays a role seems to be so downplayed. It seems like there's not a almost cultural reflection, whether it's within the leaders of the church or the members of the church. It's like they're like, oh, that crazy lady Ruby, what does she have to do with us? A lot. A lot, actually. It seems like almost everything she was doing was motivated by the teachings of this church. But here we see, in that clip, she's going to cut the heads off of the stuffed animal of one of the daughters. And it's interesting to see Sherry in the background kind of swoop in and hug her, but also keep a smile on her face. Because I'm sure, if I had to read into that smile, she is knowing that if she has anything other than a smile, that Ruby will also yell at Sherry too. And that if she can comfort her sister, but also show like, we're still a happy family, everything's great and sunny, I'm sure that all those kids just felt like they had to have that smile plastered on their face, walking around the house all the time. Even like the clip I showed you where Ruby's yelling at her daughter, why are you making that face? This perpetual obsession with smiling is also so Mormon. When I was a kid in Sunday school, we would sing this song and we would make it would look like this. And the song goes like this. If you chance to meet a frown, do not let it stay. Simply turn it upside down and smile that frown away. And then there's more lines of the song that's like, no one likes a frowny face, change it for a smile. And in my Mormon face video, I actually go in a deep dive into why Mormons are so obsessed with smiling. The Mormon smile. Jeanette McCurdy talks about the smiling Mormons. I think that that's why so many people think that when Mormons smile, it's a little eerie, because it can feel like this Ruby Frankie scene where she's smiling and then yelling at her kids and then smiling, and it's like the smile doesn't reach their eyes. It's like they're smiling because that's what they've been trained to do. And that's why it's very eerie and dystopian, I think, sometimes to be around members, because this false persona can feel very thin and very conditional and almost, they're like, oh, do you want to join my church? We're all so happy. In one book I read, she says that when Mormons smile, their eyes are bright but not deep. And I felt like that was the most accurate description I've ever heard of a Mormon smile. So that's Ruby. Ruby is, such a product of Mormonism in every stretch of the imagination. We also see in the show, Jodi Hildebrandt is the last person to highlight as one of the main people that we see on the show. Jodi's story is absolutely wild. In the show, we get to see scenes of Jodi pretending to be possessed by devils, and like yelling and wailing and gnashing of teeth. Jodi seems the most crazy. Sherry, I think, credits Ruby's. Basically, she seems to say that when Ruby met Jodi, it just opened the Pandora's box. Ruby had this sense for abuse and cruelty all along, but Jodi Hildebrandt opened that up and encouraged her and said, this is how you're showing love. Hurting your children is how you show love. Sherry writes a lot about Jodi in her book. In this chapter, she writes about a conversation with Jodi, and Jodi says, "The problem with society today is that we coddle children," she told me. "We want to give them everything they want, and then we wonder why they grow up to be selfish and lazy. But they're babies, Jodi. They can't help it if they cry or need things." Jodi's eyes glinted with something dark and unsettling. "Sherry, you think a baby doesn't know how to manipulate? How to get what it wants?" I swallowed hard, my mouth suddenly dry. "I think a baby cries because it needs food or comfort or..." Jodi waved her hands dismissively. "A baby cries because it's entitled, and it knows someone will come running because it believes that the world revolves around them and their needs. Unless you train it to not be entitled, you're just reinforcing that behavior in them. It's our job, as women and mothers, to break that cycle of manipulation, to teach children from an early age that they need to earn their blessings. Only then can we hope to create a society free from distortion." So Jodi was a therapist, which is unbelievable. She was a therapist that was on the list of approved therapists for the Mormon Church. So most of her clientele, if not all, was Mormon. She was on a list that, the people don't know the church has this whole system of therapists. It's called LDS Family Services. And most members of the church are encouraged don't just go to any therapist, go to a Mormon therapist who will support you in your religion. Often that has taken the form of something like conversion therapy, where, a young kid is struggling with same-sex attraction, and instead of supporting their child or taking them to a real therapist, the Mormon parents will take them to an LDS Family Services therapist who will then do conversion therapy and try to coach them out of being gay. And so when I say that Jodi was a therapist, it's a very specific type of therapist. It's a Mormon therapist. And I've shared that when I told my Mormon therapist that I was having a faith crisis, she told me I shouldn't have one, and that I basically needed the church, and that if I walked away from the church, it would be a bad thing in my life, and a therapist is not supposed to tell you what to do. Mormon Stories has done a lot of coverage on Jodi Hildebrandt, specifically how she ended up losing her license for not respecting client privacy. Here's the episode where they interview the person who tells that story. So basically, she was on this list. She got kicked off the list, but then continued doing therapy with the people she could more or less convince to still trust her, who were still members of the church. In addition to being removed from that list of LDS therapists, her license was also put on probation for 12 months after this instance where she didn't respect her client's privacy. While the 8 Passengers YouTube channel has been totally taken down and scrubbed from the internet, Instagram has not been so thorough. There is still the Connections Instagram account with a lot of videos of Ruby and Jodi giving their little talks and giving wisdom. Here's one of the reels I found.
"I love anger only when it's used in truth. Only in truth. And obviously you can have very clear, motivating anger inside truth. Distorted anger is there to destroy, to attack, to defame, to exploit, to abuse. It has nothing but..."
The irony of her using the word abuse there and saying, "I love anger, righteous indignation." is a great thing. In that video, so the videos that her and Ruby do on this YouTube channel, the Connections YouTube channel, that house is where the kids escaped from. So where they're filming, that's the house the kids escaped from. And it seems fairly likely that even as they're sitting, look at Ruby's smile, as they're sitting on that couch, right, cozied up next to each other, there's people, many say, Sherry included, that they were lovers. As they're sitting next to each other, that maybe one of the kids is, or both the kids are locked up in some room in that house. And the idea that she's talking about how sometimes anger, distorted anger, can cause abuse. So I watched some of the videos from that Instagram account. I'll link it below. It's bonkers and crazy that it hasn't been taken down. All the comments, you guys are abusing kids. You can rot in jail. You're both devils. You're headed to hell. Unsurprising, people are going to that account still and just being like, why is this even still up on the internet? And you guys are horrible. This word connections is essentially the name for the therapy brand that Jodi created. Jodi's home seemingly just sold for $4.5 million. It was listed, I think, for $5.5 million in St. George, Utah. Total mansion. Obviously, she was raking in the dollars with her participation in this therapy program. Here's another reel of Ruby sharing more of her connections theories. But before I share that, just a quick reminder to like this video, subscribe to my channel. I have a new video every single week about Mormon doctrine, my experience in the Mormon church, Mormon pop culture. So if you want to see that, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. Here's another reel of Ruby talking.
Will be placing your child's desires over responsibility. It is holding your child's behavioral manifestations as the first priority over principles. You are basing your parenting decisions on how will the child respond. So you're taking the child's response.
So as you can tell, it's just kind of mumbo jumbo a little bit. Somehow still has 34 likes. I think it's so strange to see both Ruby Frankie and Jodi Hildebrandt trying to use, basically retrofit therapy language over their weird conceptions about the world. It doesn't even make sense, half of what they say. If you try to listen and hear, like, it's like they're just taking words from different parts of their brain and shoving them into would-be sentences. They've gone mad, is what I'm saying. I do think what's at the heart of what she's getting at is that, and what we see in the show as well, is that she's basically saying that loving your children too much is abusing them, actually. That the way to show love is not to show affection and give hugs and ask, how are you doing? It's to, at another portion, she says, if your child was on fire, you would hit them over and over again to get them, to make sure they're not on fire. If you knew that there was cancer in your child's body, you'd take a scalpel and cut it out. And unfortunately, she seems to be talking literally about using fire and scalpels based on what she did to the children. What I think is crazy is that this, like I said, is talked about in Mormon doctrine, that love isn't love. Love as society says love, that's not actually love. And here is a talk from a well-known church leader, Elder Dallin H. Oaks. He's one of the 12 apostles. This talk is called Love and Law, and to read from it, he says, some seem to value God's love because their hope is that his love is so great and so unconditional that it will mercifully excuse them from obeying God's laws. In contrast, those who understand God's plan for his children know that God's laws are invariable, which is another great evidence of his love for his children. Mercy cannot rob justice. So what he's saying is that God's love is justice. God's love is not saying, you know what, you made a mistake, don't worry about it. He uses the instance of children living in sin. So if you have kids who are choosing to cohabitate, should you just say, it's okay, I love you anyways? No, that's not love. is what he's saying. You should chastise them. You should reprimand them. You should remind them that what they're doing is not God's will. You should tell them they're living in sin. That's love. Love is reminding people of God's laws, not loving them unconditionally. And so what this talk is, and I'll link it below, is basically him saying you should not love your children unconditionally. And that's what Ruby is saying too. You should not love your children unconditionally. You should, when you see in them a weakness, when you see in them a sin, you should tell them they're in sin. You should punish them for being in sin. And punishment and justice is the true love, not mercy. So what Ruby is spouting in that Instagram reel and in the show, where she's saying, this is true love. Justice is love. Abuse is love. To me, this is directly stemming from talks like this about what love really is. He goes on to say, parents should also remember the Lord's frequent teaching that whom the Lord loveth, he chasteneth. Hebrews 12:6. In his conference talk on tolerance and love, Elder M. Russell Nelson taught, real love for the sinner may compel courageous confrontation, not acquiescence. Real love does not support self-destructing behavior. And so just to drive it home for another time, and which is why I almost wish I could just have a conversation with Sherry, which I know I probably never will since she's active in the church. These teachings from Elder Oaks, this is not, sometimes I bring up quotes from Mormon apostles 100 years ago, 50 years ago. This is a talk given in 2009. This is a talk I remember very distinctly hearing this speech when I was in high school, learning that real love is not loving people. It's chastening them if they're living in sin. And that concept is the basis for why Ruby felt like it was okay to hit her kids, to not give them a bed. If Chad is mouthing off, or if Chad is kissing a girl, he doesn't deserve a bed. Who the Lord loveth, he chasteneth. Ruby was taught this behavior by the Mormon church. This is a destructive doctrine that encourages parents to not love their children, but to treat them in a harmful way, to treat them as projects. And I think this talk and speeches like it have done more to damage children than these people will ever be able to comprehend. In the show, we see Ruby enact this type of love constantly. I've talked quite a bit about the bed beanbag situation. Here's the clip of where they talk about it in the show.
Yeah. Got it.
Ruby and I both were like, okay, I think you're ready to have the privilege back of a bedroom. That was the spark that blew the powder keg.
Can we talk about how Kevin seems more upset that they lost their audience for this whole bed situation than he does about taking the kid's bed? And he even says at another point that he was not really for the YouTube channel, and then once they started making money, he was all about it.
In our house, when we take something away, it's because they have shown that they are not responsible enough to manage it. And so we don't just turn around and give it back as soon as they start acting good.
Holy.
Have I ever given something back less than 6 months?
No. My bedroom was taken away for 7 months, and then you give it back like a couple of weeks ago.
I don't think our viewers know that.
Sleeping on a beanbag.
So he goes on to say he's been sleeping on a beanbag. Off to the side here, here's the slow-mo. Watch Ruby's face as he says that. The smile that lightens her face. It's shocking that that is how she responds to that information, and how that's like, it's like she has this public relations version of herself. Or even, they posted this on their channel and had obviously a ton of backlash for it. Also on Hulu, on episode 1, that is the still that they use for episode 1, where he's just sitting there like, yeah, I just got my bed back. And she's like, this like bright smile with her teeth whitened, her eyelashes done, her brows done, her hair dyed. It's like she's gone so out of her way to look so perfect, and she's rotten on the inside. And so in my opinion, Mormon doctrine is what taught her to take her bed from her child. It's what taught her, that's what she's saying. When I punish my child, it's not just for a few days. It's not just for a quick time out. It's for 7 months. And that's love. Let's take it back a little bit to the beginnings of the YouTube channel, the beginnings of the Frankie family. The show goes over Kevin and Ruby's courtship. Even that is a crazy story. I guess she in her closet had this chart of everything she wanted out of a man. And then at the top of the chart was all these guys' names who she was dating. And Kevin memorized the chart and, chart maxed to make sure that Sherry would be into him. I've talked a lot about how I also extensively wrote lists about what I wanted out of a future man. This is also a very Mormon thing, to be writing letters to your husband, writing attributes of what your husband should be and have and do. I mean, when I say Mormonism made this woman, from head to toe, this Mormonism made this woman. After they were married and had their kids, their first ever YouTube video was a gender reveal showing that Ruby's last child would be a girl. That's one of the same children. It's very eerie. They end on that scene too of her cutting the cake, and it's pink. That's the same daughter that she would go on to be imprisoned for abusing. So seeing this, oh, the baby's a girl, and then seeing the abuse that she did to the girl is another way the editors juxtapose this happy family image with the reality of what was really going on behind the scenes. Here's another clip of Kevin coming home from work early on in the YouTube channel and how he was responding to being on camera.
Let's have family prayer over.
She filmed everything. And I was so uncomfortable with it.
Okay.
You're home. Okay, well, I turned the camera on just long enough so everyone can see you.
Hi, everybody. I'm back at work now.
I know.
Never seen.
So
When I came in the door, wherever Ruby was, the camera was.
I can't imagine growing up in a house where there's just a camera shoved in your face constantly. So yeah, Kevin says, he was kind of uncomfortable with it at first. You can see his face. He's kind of like, bleh. And then he does the thing, hi, everybody. And then he's like, it's really creepy to see them all do that over and over again. They're like, la, 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 especially Ruby, obviously. It seems from the get-go, this was very much Ruby's shtick, and then as they started making money, it became more of Kevin's shtick. Sherry also says in her book that her mom was always abusive and was hitting them constantly. Ruby's hand would often find its way to my face, a sharp sting of displeasure delivered with precision. Her slaps were calibrated, never hard enough to leave visible bruises, at least on me, but always sufficient to instill fear. In her twisted logic, she was molding obedience, sculpting compliance with each stinging blow. This is why I feel like Sherry doesn't always seem to connect the dots, that parenting in this way is somewhat uniquely Mormon. I think the show does a great job, too, of showing just how much Mormonism really focuses on appearances. They have all of these scenes of these beautiful big houses, these perfect people with perfect clothes. They're wealthy. The average home value in Springville, Utah was about $500,000, $500,000 in 2025. So it's a pretty rich community by comparison of the median within an average American neighborhood. I think this focus on outward appearances is something I've talked quite a bit about. I discussed it on this interview. I have seen a somewhat interesting trend on social media. I'll put them off to the side here. This first one is Whitney from Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, and people have claimed she's not very Mormon. And so to prove she's Mormon, she walks around her house and shows all the things in her house that prove she's Mormon. So that's one example of this. I also found this TikTok video. He does a similar thing where he goes around his house and it's like, people say we're not Christian. Look at all this stuff in my house. This proves I'm Christian. This proving I'm a certain way by showing my objects or by, being beautiful or by having a big house. Mormonism, I think, is very much based in a prosperity doctrine. The richer you are, the more blessed you are, the more God loves you, the more righteous you are. And so I think the show also does a good job at showing this side of Mormonism. You know, Chad says, I haven't slept on a bed in 7 months. And Ruby's like, ding, you know, that is so Mormon to me. This rot from within, but this perfect outward appearance. And I think it's why so many people get interested in Mormonism, because, oh, they're these like shiny, happy people who are so perfect. They're rich. They've got big families. The kids are always smiling. Everyone's so thin and pretty. And I think the Frankie family, to me, shows the reality of what is behind this ultra manufactured facade. I also looked up child abuse rates in Utah, and it's pretty low, which at first on its face, you know, here's a graph, sounds great. Oh, there's actually not a lot of child abuse in Utah. Isn't that great? No. It's actually a sign to me that they just don't investigate child abuse. To me, anything on this map that shows high amounts, so child abuse exists in every culture. It exists on every stratus of the socioeconomic ladder, in every cultural group, in every racial group. Child abuse exists everywhere. And it's not that in one state there's so much more child abuse than another. It's that that state actually prosecutes child abusers much more thoroughly. They are hard on child abuse. They actually find child abusers and put them in jail, and they're more likely to convict child abusers. So, you know, as a teacher, I had many instances of calling CPS, because as a teacher, you're a mandated reporter, calling CPS and saying, I'm really worried about this student, and they don't investigate. I would say I probably called CPS 30 to 40 times in my 7 or so years as a public school teacher, and I never had a CPS case get past the intake call. And so Texas also ranks pretty low in child abuse. Oh, great. There's no child abuse in Texas. There's no child abuse in Utah. No, they just don't investigate it. And if you don't investigate it, it doesn't show up on a report. And we see that happen in the Hulu series and with the Frankie family. The neighbors called CPS, which is why Sherry's so amazing and loved. Sherry called the police and tried to get them to investigate. They never investigated till the youngest son escaped from the house before he was killed. Before he was murdered, he escaped. Because I do believe he would have been murdered. So, when you see this stat, oh, Utah, so low on the chart. Great on child abuse. No, that means they don't prosecute child abusers. That means they're soft on child abuse. So shame on Utah, shame on Texas. If a child's being abused, they are the most vulnerable parts of our society, children. And so it pisses me off to see this chart of Utah getting off easy. It makes Utah look good. It makes Texas look good. Oh, there's not a lot of child abuse in Texas. No, they're soft on abuse. That's why they don't have the stats. So anyways, hearing the story of multiple neighbors trying to call the police, of Sherry trying to intercede, and nothing. That was my experience too. As part of highlighting why the Frankies wanted to start a YouTube channel, I'll also say that Ruby's siblings, her sisters, also have YouTube channels. I looked into them a bit, and they are also showing their kids, some of her sisters, I found 2 videos where her sisters kind of address the allegations or, talk about kind of their perspective on this abuse situation. The reason why this is so unsurprising is that Mormons have long been encouraged to post their lives online, to post their children online. This is a commandment from the leaders of the church. Sherry says, in my church, we're encouraged to document our lives meticulously, creating a roadmap for future generations to understand their roots. And it seemed as though the internet was just an extension of that, another way in which to do the Lord's work. It's very easy to find quotes from many different leaders echoing this call: share the gospel, post about Christmas, post about Jesus. It's so common to see a member put LDS.org or some version, come unto Christ into their Instagram bio. They'll always have some link to the church. So it's kind of this constant approach of using your life to do missionary work online. And this is why we have one of the reasons there's a rise of Mormon influencers, Mormon family vloggers, Mormon bloggers. Mormons are expressly told this is a direction from your leaders, a commandment from your leaders: share your life online. I think this is one of the reasons why Mormons also are so outward focused. I mean, what makes you more obsessed with the way you look and your house looks than social media? One of the ironies that I noticed in the show is that in that scene where she's holding up the markers, you can see she and I have the same standard issue Mormon scriptures. You can see while she's yelling at her kids, her scriptures in the background. And that is just such a ripe irony that is hard to miss. Here's another scene that I felt was also very Mormon.
He is obedient. But the moment you disobey me, you're going to fear me.
Sit down right here.
Go sit on the couch.
Sit her down on the flipping couch.
Okay.
Stop hijacking.
Stop it.
The irony of not being willing to say the F word. Instead, she says flipping. You won't swear, but you'll abuse your kids. But, there's no, express rule against abusing your kids, but there is a rule about swearing. No swearing. BYU, no swearing. For the strength of youth, no swearing. So she's following the rules. That's the crazy thing, is in so many instances, she's not drinking coffee, she's not watching R-rated movies, she's not saying the F word, but she's abusing her kids. And I think this legalistic religion, which has all of these tiny little rules to follow, as a kid, I was told having multiple piercings in your ear is a win for Satan. Ruby has one set of piercings. She's following all the Mormon rules. And she's so evil. One thing, though, that they highlight on the show is that the more lurid the topic, the more clicks they would get. Here's a clip where they show how Chad was exploited using this theory. Also, if you notice in this clip with Chad, he has a poster on his wall, and there's a massive photo, a massive poster of Joseph Smith. I think that the church really wants to downplay how much this Mormon church was part of this story. And it's in everything. It's in everything. Okay.
Watching the subscribers grow was really big. And the understanding was that if Sherry or Chad are on the thumbnail, then the video is going to do better than if just Ruby was on it or the little kids.
Also, even just including that, her punching them. There's so many moments in this where I don't know who, I think the editors did a really good job. There's just moments where you're like, oh my gosh, she's like pretending to punch him, but also she was really actually punching him and the other kids.
I knew very early on that people liked seeing me the most. And I think that's a little selfish of me to say, but it was also true.
He was everything that I wished that I was when I was a kid. Confident, handsome, great at sports, the heartthrob, and the comedic relief. And that's important. Ruby knew that. And she exploited it.
Did you exploit it?
Absolutely, I did.
When I say devils, I'm glad that, that was another really well done part of the series, is that the interviewer gives these follow-up moments to Kevin. He basically says the question that the audience would be asking if they could. He's like, Ruby exploited it. And, Kevin has now been on the internet for years. He obviously is taking this interview. He's still putting the blame on Ruby. And I'm glad the interviewer is like, did you exploit it? And he's like, yeah, absolutely I did. And just such a garbage human being, honestly. It's like the meme of like the Disney characters, like their eyes filling with the money. And he's like, oh, whatever, you can show my kids doing anything anywhere because I get money for it. I also think seeing some of these clips with Chad makes me emotional because he looks very, especially, when he's a little kid, he looks very similar to my son, my 6-year-old. And as you all know, I do not put my faces of my children online. When I first started posting videos, my channel's never been like momfluencer type thing, but even though I don't put it on screen, having children is the biggest part of my life. Along with my my family as a whole is the biggest part of my life. And so it feels like to not, talk about having kids or show some cute pictures, it feels like it's an incomplete picture because it's such a big part of me. When I first was posting, there's a few times that I just would use a photo. Every time I just felt weird about it and just like, they can't consent to this. And that was when I was still getting very small amounts of views. And since then, I've just stopped doing it entirely, not even because I was convinced by some outside force, but because I just came to the conclusion that I just did not feel okay with it. I just felt like it was not okay with me to have them on the internet. Seeing Chad exploited is really sad because it feels like I'm looking at my own children, and obviously I'll say like, I took a picture of myself after I finished watching this show because I was just like, this is how much I've been crying, because you can't really watch this type of stuff and it doesn't impact you. And maybe I'm just like an ultra sensitive person, but to see children treated this way and to see parents so callously just saying, yeah, I exploited my children, it's unspeakable. And maybe because while I don't really believe in sacred things in a religious sense anymore, if there's one thing I believe that is sacred, it's children. And so I think putting your children online is something that very much disrespects their autonomy, their personhood. I do not believe children can consent or understand the consequences of what it is to be online. In a minute, I'll get into some of the other influencers that have put their kids online, and I often see people posting pictures of their kids in front of their house. The idea that you would let people know where your kids live is idiocy. I'm sorry, but if you're posting a viral video of your kids in front of your house, you're an idiot. And I'm sorry, and maybe it's not your fault you're an idiot because you haven't been educated, but the things that people do to their kids online is shocking to me. The lack of privacy they allow their own children. And I think that's another irony that I have felt very strongly watching these child family vloggers is, as you all know, there's the Mormon temple. There's the outfits they wear, the chanting they do, the secret garments. Mormons are actually quite good at keeping secrets. They will be quick to tell you that what happens in the temple is too sacred to talk about. And then they'll post a video of their baby in a bath. And that is a shocking level of not comprehending what is sacred. You can keep your church and the temple sacred, but you'll post a picture of your baby in a diaper online? That reveals to me that you don't actually have a moral compass and understand what sacred means. Sorry that I am very ranty in this video, but it actually does make me quite angry. And I'm glad that I'm very inspired by Sherry trying to make legislation that will change some of the ways that these children are being put online. It's like the parents see a graph of the more you exploit your children, the more money you make. And they show, they have a video where they ripped some of Sherry's eyebrow off and she's crying. They posted that online. Ruby's filming Chad with his shirt off in the bathroom. I don't know if that was posted online or if that was just some of the unseen footage. They showed Chad's first shave, you know, bra shopping. These are intimate moments that the children deserve to just be able to grow up and experience adolescence and hit puberty by them, you know, in the privacy of their own home with the protection of their parents. But these are instead content opportunities to be mined so that the views go up and the revenue goes up. And it's disgusting. There are so many Mormon family vloggers, but a few that I wanted to highlight. There's the channel Cute Girls Hairstyles. If you've heard of Brooklyn and Bailey, that's their mom. If you go to their channel and sort their videos by popular, they have a video that is 147 million views, an incredible number of views. It's almost 4 times as popular as their next video. The comments are turned off, and it is a mermaid video where they show the little girls in bathing suits and underwater. And it's not surprising why that video is more viral than the rest of their videos. And this is a trend that this is something I always do now when I encounter family vloggers, is I go and I sort by most popular and I see their most popular video. And it is always a video where they are exploiting the children the most. And whether it's exploiting them through showing a lot of the children's skin, or if it's exploiting through showing a really embarrassing moment for the child or a really harrowing moment. The YouTube channel Not Enough Nelsons is another very well-known Mormon family vlogging channel. And their most viewed video is that they got into a car accident and the daughter is in a neck brace on the thumbnail. You know, you can almost see them getting in the car accident and the mom getting excited, being like, we've got to tell our subscribers about this. And they made the girl sit with her neck brace and talk about the accident. What a great money-making opportunity. It's just conflicting interests, because the more they exploit the children, the more money they make. And these parents have no shame. These parents have no moral compass. Another one is Ballerina Farm, and she gets a lot of criticism for her content and being a trad wife. But to me, I think she really hasn't faced a lot of criticism for how much she features her kids. This photo, I saw this photo when Ballerina Farm was in one of her, beauty pageants. And as you can see, all the kids are smiling, and then the daughter is sobbing. The mom and dad have just the most massive, there's that smile again. And if I'm being honest, if my child was crying that much, I couldn't smile that much. I will just full on say there's been times because like I said, sometimes I try to put, as a parent myself, I'm like, what would I do in this situation? There's some times where a child is crying and it's not super easy to comfort them. Like the moment I thought of is like, maybe you're running to catch your flight. You're gonna miss your flight. The baby is hungry or crying. But in that situation, I'm still very focused on trying to calm the child down. Maybe I'm like, we still have to be running. We're in a rush. I couldn't smile like that though. There's nothing that's an emergency about taking a photo. We also have Nurse Hannah. She went viral because she had 17 diapers that she filmed herself picking up around her house to show, I guess, she never cleans. She's also Mormon. They're all Mormon, everyone I'm listing. She's under investigation by CPS. There was another video where she puts her hand out. This video has been taken down, but she puts her hand out and her son flinches, which is quite revealing. So she's under investigation. That's another Mormon mommy influencer. There is also Michaela from Secret Lives. I found this post to be quite strange. There's several portions where she describes, so she's recently pregnant, and she says that the baby will basically, she's like, I'm so excited for this next step on my healing journey. And she also said, praying this baby heals me. And of course, in all of the pictures, the husband looks angry. Having a baby so that the baby heals you is not a good reason to have a baby. And the idea that a baby would be brought into the world and that the mom in the caption is making it about her own healing is, I mean, I'm not saying, you know, I feel bad that Michaela has this illness. That sounds really challenging. You shouldn't have kids to heal you, though. That's not a reason to have a baby. If this is what people show online, if filming yourself getting 17 diapers off the ground is what you show online, what's behind the scenes? Obviously with Ruby, we also saw, you know, this beautiful veneer and then abuse behind the scenes. And so this idea that she's typing in the caption, praying this baby heals me, it's just a misunderstanding about why to have children. So that's a few examples of people posting on social media. I will also share from my own personal experience seeing more members of the Mormon church who I served my mission with or went to BYU with. The number of times I've seen a bath video, you know, little tiny baby in the bath for a public audience of 5,000 to 10,000 followers on a public account that anyone could be following, you don't know. That happens a lot. And just like I saw people who I knew posting their kids in baths, in diapers, guess what the first ever viral video was for the Frankie family? It was baby climbs out of crib. They show it in the Hulu series, and wouldn't you know it, it's a baby in a little diaper, and the diaper, you know, shimmying around. Wow, the diaper video is the first viral video of the family? Who would have thought? You know, for some people, I want to give them the benefit of the doubt. You're just naive. You don't understand how many predators are downloading these videos. But it's also, you know, maybe you're naive to how many people online are just creeps. But you can't be naive to the fact that you're taking this ultra sacred and very private moment of your little tiny baby and you're blasting it online. Maybe I'll come into your bath and take a video of you and post it on a public account. How would you like it? I'm guessing you would probably call the police on me if I tried to do that to you. As you should. And yet, you can't like, you know, where's the tea leaves of being like, well, I wouldn't want someone to do that to me, so maybe I shouldn't do it to my own children. I truly don't understand. To continue, we see in the show how the channel is getting more and more subscribers. The kids are starting to get tired of it though, so here's that clip.
But we did see changes in the kids accumulating.
Hey, and Chad today are being terrible.
You can use their faces as B-roll.
The whole reason here is because of our job. And you guys are acting like this is stupid.
The kids started to complain about everything.
The kids started to complain about everything. Maybe because you're making them do child labor. Asking your kids to be filming day after day after day. Do this, make this face, walk over here, pose with this product. That's child labor. And child labor is abuse. Even here, he's like, the kids are just really being a bit grumpy. And he's like, this is our job. This paid for our vacation. And they're like, I'm a child. I shouldn't have a job, actually. And, you know, I didn't ask to go on this vacation. You planned it so that we could take videos for our YouTube channel. I did think another clip was very interesting because they show Ruby meeting one of their subscribers, and this is what she says about them.
Tell us who you are again.
Alright, so I'm Finn. I'm a kid of 8 passengers. I'm gonna join the church for Christ Latter-day Saints.
And she would confide to me as she was.
So, just like Mormon leaders had hoped, this big project of the family has now led someone to choose to, he's saying, I'm going to get baptized into the Mormon church. And Ruby's, you know, so happy, giving him a big hug. In her book, Sherry says, this is Ruby reading a comment. Watching your family, it's like I finally found a place where I belong. Ruby read out loud. You guys are so happy and loving and above all, honest. it gives me hope that maybe one day I can have that too. I even started going to church because of you, and I've been thinking about getting baptized in the LDS church. So, I mean, that's a different story, I assume, from that one. I've had people tell me that because they watched Ballerina Farm's videos, they were thinking about joining the church, and then they found my videos. So, you know, this program of post your family online, get converts, is obviously having some good returns for the church in even just this one family, not speaking about the many families who are embarking on this vlogging lifestyle. I also found this Mormon influencer. Her name is Al Caraway. She was famous because she has a bunch of tattoos and she's Mormon. She wrote a book called The Tattooed Mormon, which sounds like a circus act. But she has multiple posts on her page where she is showing herself with a recent convert who she helped to convert. And it's always the photos I found, it's men. So it's like she's like this cute woman going over like, hey, you should get baptized in my church. And I'm an influencer with 200,000 plus followers. And, you know, I love the Mormon church. And hey, if you get baptized, I'll post you on my channel, my Instagram. I don't know, this way of trying to convert people, and almost, these people who are just kind of somewhat random people are now being highlighted by these ultra famous figures in the community because they're saying they're willing to get baptized. It's like a way for them to get close to these famous people and being like, I'm going to get baptized and this famous person likes me because I'm willing to get baptized. It's very manipulative. Oh, sorry. I said her book title wrong. It's More Than the Tattooed Mormon. And that's I think the book she kind of got famous off of. All of this massive fame culminates in, for Mother's Day, YouTube, the platform YouTube, shares the Frankie family for Mother's Day. They post a photo of the Frankies to celebrate Mother's Day. So that is kind of shown as, the pinnacle of their YouTube success, where they're still the golden family, nothing's come out yet. And then after that, massive big post from YouTube, soon after that, the sleeping bag gate happens to the channel. And it's revealed that Ruby is not this perfect, loving mother that she has led everyone to believe. In the show, it says that a lawyer told Ruby to make an apology video, but Ruby just digs her heels in, which is how we get to episode 2 of the series, where she goes from trying to put on appearances and curate this perfect, happy family to getting more involved with Jodi Hildebrandt and connections and becoming absolutely crazy. Here's one of the scenes of what the channel transitions to after the Chad beanbag situation goes down.
The last days in the scriptures are a period of however long that the world's gonna burn, or a plague is gonna come and destroy everyone. And then Christ comes and the world is saved and everyone can be happy again. But to get there, there's a period of just absolute hell.
Did Ruby think that?
This fear of the second coming is something I talked about a few videos back, about how so many Mormons get very involved with thinking about doomsday, thinking about the second coming, preparing, food storage, prepping. So here's Ruby showing some of her preps for doomsday.
I'll do this for the intro. Are you guys ready to become a food prepper with me? No, emergency prepper. Are you guys ready to become an emergency prepper with me?
No, Ruby, we are not. Kevin also says that he believes that it was the end of the world. It's like they go from this family that's trying to get brand deals and going to Disneyland to suddenly figuring out how to stockpile food. Sherry says that Jodi set off what was already in Ruby's heart. And I think that this is where we see the transition from the social media family to how we end up with Ruby in prison. To give a little bit more background on Jodi, essentially, Jodi had her connections, classes, and program. I found this Reddit post, which I definitely recommend reading in depth. somebody who gave over $100,000, just one person, to have Jodi help them save their marriage. I've also talked a lot about how Mormons are very obsessed with pornography addiction. When I say pornography addiction, that may mean someone who is truly watching all the time and it's destroying their relationships. But it also, in Mormonism, could mean someone who looks at a Victoria's Secret magazine once a month would also be a pornography addict. And so part of Jodi's platform was basically harnessing this fear that Mormon women have that their husbands are pornography addicts and that they are, going to cheat on them, harnessing that fear and using it to give her a lot of money. They show a lot of classes in the second episode, and basically Jodi is poisoning these women against their husbands, and she is known for having broken up many marriages. Often she would say that the husband should move out of the house, should leave for 6 months to a year to show his penitence, and so she just had a reputation for breaking up marriages. And she begins to do the same thing to Ruby. She basically knows how to take all these fears, the fears of the second coming, the fears of pornography addiction, using the language of Jesus Christ and Christianity, using therapy language to manipulate people into trusting her to tell them what to do. One of the most common questions I've seen about the dynamic between Kevin and Ruby is why, since the Mormon church is so patriarchal, why didn't Ruby listen to her husband instead of the husband getting kicked out, the woman's running the YouTube channel, the woman's running the show? And I think one reason for this is definitely that the woman is taught that her domain is the children. So if she's hitting the kids, if she's filming the kids, and it says in this document, women are primarily responsible for the care of the children. Husbands are responsible for making money. So when you have these very clear gender roles, then depending on the man, and Kevin, of his own admission, is kind of a pushover, he's gonna let the woman do her thing. He's gonna let the woman be responsible for taking care of the kids. He's maybe not going to step in as much if the woman is doing something he disagrees with, because the children are owned by the woman and the job is owned by the man. This becomes even more significant when the man can be proven as a sinner. Then the parts are interchangeable. So the man can be kicked out, the woman can find a new husband. The belief is even that if someone's spouse isn't righteous enough in this life, then God will assign them a new spouse in the afterlife. Or if a woman is never married, then God will assign her a husband in the afterlife. And so the parts are quite interchangeable. And I think it means that if a man admits to viewing pornography, then he is a social pariah. He's a pariah within his own marriage, and he no longer wields that same priesthood power and that same authority that he once did. I think this happens even more in polygamous cultures, where only the most righteous men get tons of wives, and the unrighteous men are actually lower than the wives and are often kicked out of the society. They're abused, they go to crime. In many cases, boys as young as 10, 11, and 12 are kicked out of the community. And I think this just reveals that only the men with authority, money, power, righteousness are worthy of being the patriarch. And if they don't wield all of those different metrics of being a good Mormon man, they no longer perceive that they should have the same authority over their family. The wife might not perceive that the husband should have authority. And so I think what Jodi did was quite calculated, because if she can say that the man is too much of a sinner to be the family patriarch, then she can divide the marriage and tell both the husband and the wife that they need to, have counseling with her, pay for counseling with her so that they can be, redeemed. Jodi is absolutely crazy. And one of the most viral clips from the show is where she shows that she's being possessed. Here's that clip.
But after Jodi came into the picture, weird things started happening in our house. Jodi would go into these possessed trances.
So basically, Jodi said that she was so righteous that the devil was trying to get at her, and that she had such an important mission on this earth. This is all Mormon doctrine. Her mission on earth was so important that Satan was trying to tempt her even more. Mormon missionaries on my mission would always talk about how Satan was so much more powerful on their mission because they were doing the Lord's work and they could feel the presence of Satan. And I was telling my husband about this, and I, as a Mormon woman, never had the priesthood. Not allowed. But on my husband's mission, he would have members come and ask him to perform exorcisms and cast out demons. And so he would go, and there's a way you're kind of taught to do this in the temple. I'll show you a clip in a minute, where you put your right arm to the square and you basically say, in the name of Jesus Christ, and by the proper priesthood authority, I banish the spirits from the house, or whatever, leave our presence. And my own husband would do that on his mission. In a bit, we'll show that Jodi had a Mormon bishop come to her house and perform an exorcism. And this just, I think, shows this is where this idea of possession, where we're getting to, is how Ruby thought her youngest 2 children were possessed, and that's why she was abusing them. But this is where this idea of possession starts in the family. This is the seed where the plant begins to grow, this idea that the devil is trying to get at them. Just as I read from Sherry's book, just as she says in the video, and Kevin says, they all believe that the devil is very real. This is a clip from the Mormon Church's production of the life of Joseph Smith, where they show that the devil is trying to overtake Joseph Smith. He's praying.
I kneeled down and began to offer up the desires of my heart to God.
I thought this was so scary when I watched this when I was a kid.
I was seized upon by some power, an actual being from the unseen world, exerting all my strength to call upon God.
So yeah, Mormons definitely believe in demonic possession. I told you about Joseph Smith had the rules of how to tell a devil from an angel. I heard this all the time growing up. I watched this video constantly growing up as a kid. This was one of the only shows we were allowed to watch on Sunday. Most videos we weren't allowed to watch, but this we could watch. So I think that just reveals, we have Ruby Frankie abusing her kids because she thinks they're possessed. We have the Mormon doctrine of possession. I felt a physical being from the unseen world. And then here is the clip from the temple. This is the film they show in the very secretive endowment. So you're wearing the full get-up that I've shown before, and you're watching your little film. And this is the scene where you learn, basically men learn, how to perform an exorcism within the temple. Also, I'll say what happens in the temple is very secretive, as I've said. And so this is a secret recording. That's why the quality is so bad, because this was recorded in secret. So that's Satan.
Over my kingdom and my greatness and glory. I have a word to say concerning these people. If they do not walk up to every covenant they make at these altars in this temple this day, they will be in my power. Satan, we command you to depart. By what authority? In the name of Jesus Christ, our Master.
So I told you my husband did that on his mission. Here's Kevin talking about doing that at Jodi Hildebrandt's house and to Jodi.
How did you think you could help Jodi?
Casting the evil spirits out. Exorcising them out.
This isn't some crazy kooky, they're not coming up with this. This is Mormon. This is the Mormon doctrine playing a role here.
I would place my hands on her head.
Okay, so he gave a blessing. He didn't do the arm thing.
And then I would command the demons to depart. And then I would state every name of Jesus Christ that I could possibly think of. And those evil spirits were very reactive to those names.
You can tell, I mean, he's still brainwashed, right? I mean, they're all still kind of brainwashed by the church and by church teachings. I mean, all of this is kind of the more extreme versions of Mormonism. It's the more traditional and kind of fundamentalist versions of Mormonism, but it all still is Mormonism. Here's the clip where a Mormon bishop visits Jodi's house to also continue with this whole exorcism program.
Jodi's bishop was also there, blessing her house. And he just said, I can't keep doing this, and we need to come up with another solution.
So, because of all of this possession, Jodi being possessed, her house is possessed, she says she has to move in with the Frankies. And this is kind of the beginning of the end for the Frankie, you know, for Ruby and Kevin's relationship. Basically, Jodi stays in Sherry's bedroom for a hot second. And then because she's still experiencing possession, she has to move into Ruby's bed and Kevin gets kicked out. This is the portion where Sherry basically thinks that they were having a kind of lover's affair, a fling, a thing with each other. Here's where she talks about it in the book. I looked around confused. The room was bathed in the soft glow of candles. The air was heavy with the scent of lavender and vanilla, wafting from the massage oils on the dresser. I quickly grabbed what I needed and got the hell out of there, feeling like I had just walked into someone else's honeymoon suite. And she talks about that in the Hulu series as well, and basically insinuates, without saying quite so much, that Ruby and Jodi were lovers. It's around this time that Jodi tells Chad, because one thing I haven't mentioned is that Jodi was having meetings with Chad. Jodi is also the one that said he should lose his bedroom privileges. So Jodi is just having these weekly meetings with Chad. She tells Chad that he should confess to Ruby that he's been watching pornography, the cardinal sin for Mormon men, or even boys. And so he tells her, and Ruby essentially blames she says, the reason Jodi's been possessed is that you've been watching this, and so you need to leave too. So when Chad is 17, he is fully kicked out of the house. And around the same time, Kevin fully kicked out of the house. But Kevin and Chad are not even allowed to have contact with each other. Sherry at this point is at BYU. Apparently she texted her dad something. He hearted the message and then unhearted it. So Kevin has now allowed himself to be 100% fully removed from the family. He doesn't have visitation. This isn't even through any sort of custody situation. He's of his own volition chosen to leave and not contact any members of his family. The only person he gets to contact, of course, is Jodi. So even though Kevin and Chad are both fully kicked out of the home, they're still having these weekly sessions with Jodi. All the while, this abuse situation is getting worse and worse. This is where we get to the scene that I showed you at the beginning of Ruby's youngest son ringing that doorbell. This is the rest of that scene, and I just wanted to highlight the man's reaction to opening the door and actually taking in what's happened to this boy.
911 emergency.
I just had a 12-year-old boy show up here at my front door asking for help.
He's emaciated. He's got duct taped around each ankle. He's hungry and he's thirsty. This boy has been... This kid has obviously been... He's been detained. He's obviously covered in wounds.
So yeah, when this happened, like back in the day, I saw stills from that video, but I never actually watched the video. So I think just you hear him break, you know. You can hear his voice like break because he sees how bad it is. What I didn't know about is how they ended up finding the youngest daughter. So that after the boy comes and the police are called, they go to Jodi Hildebrandt's house. This is when they get her from her house. This is the scene.
Got movement right here. Right there. Jodi, I need you to step out.
I have my turn.
That's great. Step out of the house.
No, I'm not step out.
Step out of the house. Step out of the house.
Whoa.
Where's this guy? Come on, stand me up. Stand me up.
Wait a minute, how do you come to my house?
Then she's like, don't I have rights? What about my rights? Meanwhile, she's imprisoned 2 children in that house. I just think like, there she is, well fed with her iPhone. What about, I have my attorney on the phone. You know, what about my rights? You need a search warrant. And like just the sense of entitlement she has to human rights. Obviously, she understands that people should have rights. This is the scene where they find the other child.
Went into one room that had an attached bathroom and an attached closet, and I heard him talk to somebody.
I'm a police officer. I'm welcome. You need here?
Hey, you okay? I'm Sergeant Tobler. What's your name?
The girl looked like a young boy sitting there, shaved head, real skinny, didn't talk to us.
So the daughter was in the house, and I think that's why the boy is so brave, because I think he saved both of their lives, you know, by escaping. They've shaved the daughter's head. She's also malnourished and emaciated. It's after this moment that everything else kind of unravels. They show Jodi getting arrested. They gain access to a safe, and behind the safe is a room where they find duct tape. They find honey with cayenne pepper. And that's why I'm like, man, this show is just awful to watch. I mean, it's like I said, not for the faint of heart. Watching this, it's just, you're seeing what is the worst side of humanity. I just have such a disbelief that people can even do this. It truly is incomprehensible. I think one thing that I felt watching this is that these stories wouldn't happen without this dogma of a religion and this, whom the Lord loveth, he chasteneth. To read a quote from the prophet of the church, real love for the sinner may compel courageous confrontation, not acquiescence. Real love does not support self-destructing behavior. And she really felt like these kids were possessed. They have like a montage where they say, like, Ruby basically was writing everything in her journal, because of course Mormons journal everything. And so she basically fully admitted to all the crimes in writing, and obviously from what is, on the kids, on their own bodies, it's all showing the crimes that have been happening. But here's what they share about this demonic possession.
Was bad. How he would be forced to stand in the sun all day long, being tied down to weights. He would have to jump on a trampoline all day.
So that's what she was doing to him and his sister. This is what she wrote in her journal about why she was doing all of that.
Like, she's literally written down everything. I just remember as we went line by line that we were just in shock. I told the boy he emulates a snake. The body must engage in good work, and the good works need to be painful.
So, you know, I mean, at this point, she's obviously just in full psychosis. She's not even calling her children by their names anymore, it seems, in this journal. She's just writing the boy and the girl. From what they've shown about her journal, she fully just believed that what she was doing was in the children's best interest because they were possessed by demons. This is the same, you know, I just did all this research of the story of Lori Vallow for Lori and Chad for my other video, and it's the same thing. It's the same story again and again. It's the same story. The children are possessed. I need to rid them of the possession. This book was written by a Mormon, contains a lot of Mormon doctrine. A lot of it is like extrapolations on Mormon doctrine. It has a chokehold on so many members of this church. It talks a lot about being possessed and how easy it is to get possessed. When Lori Vallow was arrested in Hawaii for killing her kids, she was reading this book. And wouldn't you know it, in Sherry Frankie's book, she says, like so many doomsday preppers in the LDS church, they were obsessed with a book called Visions of Glory, published in 2012. A book not endorsed by the mainstream LDS church was a wild ride of near-death experiences, apocalyptic visions, and doomsday prophecies. The Mormon church has never issued a statement saying, hey, maybe we should stop reading this book because now 2 women are in prison, 2 children are dead, and 2 children are abused, and the people, the perpetrators of the crimes, loved this book. I think the church has blood on its hands here, honestly, for not dispelling or clarifying these doctrines about possession, for not even just getting rid of them entirely. Stop like adding that to your theology. You know, you've gotten rid of a lot of other things. You stopped teaching that Black people were cursed. Their skin was a curse from God for the pre-earth life. Certainly you can get rid of doctrines. Maybe it's time to get rid of the doctrine of demonic possession, because at this point there are children who have suffered because you all taught this to their moms and they believed it. Ruby texts Kevin, hey, come get the kids. And apparently, you know, Kevin also believed the kids were possessed. He thought that law enforcement was lying to him. They describe a scene where the neighbors start relaying to him all of this stuff that's been going on because he's been totally absent from the family for 13 months. And it's like he just barely starts to believe that what they're telling him is the truth. He doesn't even believe law enforcement. He refuses to see photos of what happened to the children. I mean, I would never abandon my family to begin with. So, I mean, it's all just how it got this far is unimaginable. Ruby and Jodi both go to court. They are both charged with multiple counts of aggravated child abuse. As I said at the beginning, after looking at those photos, after hearing this whole story, I fully believe that she should have been charged with attempted murder. They are both in prison. There's a fear that Ruby may get out even before her youngest children are adults, because it depends on, how long the term is, and all of the, obviously they'll have multiple opportunities to come before the court and see if they can seek a shorter sentence. That is essentially where we end the show. This is obviously an ongoing story. Every day there's a new reel from Chad, or there's a new development in the court case. So I didn't include everything. Maybe if there's another development, I'll make a follow-up video. You probably didn't enjoy this video. I honestly did not enjoy making this video, but I do think it's important. I think it's important to talk about. It's important to expose the reality that a lot of these child influencers are likely living under. It's important to me to talk about how Mormon doctrine is contributing to the abuse of children. Thank you all for watching. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to my channel. I have a new video about Mormonism every week. I was Mormon for 23 years or so. And as always, I will see you all next week.